From her station high above Earth, Yelena Markova watched the punishment arrive. On Aegis Array's main display, the sky filled with shaky diamonds of reflected sunlight. Hundreds of ships descended from high orbit, bleeding drive exhaust in desperation. They were a mess. Some looked like hollowed rocks with engines crudely bolted on. Others were freighters whose hulls had been patched so often they resembled quilts. One spun slowly, a shattered panel trailing behind it like a torn wing. "Count?" Yelena asked, though she already knew. "Refugee vessels, over 600, her sensor officer answered. "Estimated souls aboard, just over 6 million. 6 million lives dropped on her planet like a reprimand." Beyond the tangle of refugee craft, sleek Concord escort ships glided in disciplined formations, bright and unscarred. Their courses were precise, their intentions not. The escorts herded the ragged vessels toward Earth, then veered away to begin weaving a perimeter. Beacons lit up in orbital slots, tracing a luminous cage around the planet. "Containment net deploying," the officer said quietly. Yelena's jaw flexed. "Of course it is," she muttered. "They throw 6 million people at us and then install cameras to see if we choke." She flicked a smaller display to an encrypted feed from New York. The United Earth Assembly Chamber pulsed with noise, raised arms, flushed faces, bodies leaning forward over microphones like combatants over a trench. At the center, a slim man in a scuffed dark suit stood at a lectern, hands braced. Elias Cade looked more like a field coordinator than a planetary director. That was what he had been until a month ago. The microphones had been set too low for the shouting. Elias didn't raise his voice. He simply waited. Gradually, the chamber calmed enough for words to cut through. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is not a theoretical debate. The ships are already here." A live feed behind him showed streaks of fire etching lines into the atmosphere. "We all know the Concord passed the punitive relocation accord despite our objections," he continued. "They chose us because we are, in their words, resilient under stress, because we survive things we shouldn't." He paused, letting the unsaid hang there. "Because they thought it would hurt us. They did not consult us on numbers. They did not offer resources. They did not care about biocompatibility or culture or capacity." His eyes swept the room. "We can argue about their motives until the end of the century. It will not change what's falling toward us right now." A representative called out, "We are already at our limits, Director-designate. Food systems, housing, climate. How do you expect us to absorb 6 million more?" Elias's shoulders took the weight of every number they didn't have. "I don't," he said. "Not alone." Murmurs. A few startled laughs. "We cannot do this as Earth, the collection of nations, each guarding its own plate," he went on. "We can only do it as Earth, singular. And even then, we cannot do it without them." He pointed toward the falling streaks on the screen. "Those aren't crates of problems," he said. "They are doctors, engineers, farmers, children, minds and hands. The Concord thinks it is punishing us by giving us family." He let the word land. "Let us show them what that actually means." In orbit, a battered Caridi cylinder came in too shallow, nose catching the upper atmosphere like a skipping stone. Its thermal signature screamed on Yelena's board. "Object Bravo Delta is about to bounce," her officer warned. "Attitude thrusters offline. If it skips, it burns." "Not on my watch," Yelena snapped. "Spine 3, bring grav projectors online. Override caution limits. Catch them." "We'll overload the—" "Catch them!" Aegis Array's grav lattice generators groaned under a load they'd never been designed for. Invisible fingers reached down, dragged along the top of the atmosphere, and found the flailing ship. The cylinder's path bent hard, gouging a new streak of ionization across the sky. For a heartbeat, Yelena imagined hull plates peeling away, bodies tumbling into flame. Then, the course settled, shallow skip becoming a safe descent corridor. On the ground below, under a low ceiling of dirty clouds, Hong Kong Strata Port shook as the first refugees arrived. The air on the apron was a stew of rain, hot metal, and jet fuel. Cranes loomed over a maze of containers and force field corrals. One side of the port anchored the black throat of a space elevator. The rest sprawled into repurposed yards and stacked depots. Jonas Reddick walked the yellow line at the edge of the landing zone and tried not to think about how small they were compared to what was coming. He had the frame of a retired heavyweight and the bearing of a man who had spent most of his life moving into danger instead of away from it. The armband on his sleeve marked him as Trid Field Coordinator. The mud on his boots marked him as someone who didn't stay in offices long. He raised his voice over the rumble of generators. "Group C volunteers to Gate 3, he shouted. "If it's small and wobbly, you hold it up. If it's big and steady, you still hold it up. Got it?" Nervous laughter rippled along the volunteer line. Dock workers, med students, retirees, teenagers in hoodies, they all looked up when the incoming shuttle roared through the low clouds. Alejandro Duarte checked his stream status for the 10th time. Connection bars flickered amber green on his head-mounted display. "Channels live," he murmured. "Viewers. A lot, actually." He stepped backward until both the landing cradle and the volunteer cordon filled his frame. "For those just joining," he said, voice steadying into the cadence that had earned him an audience even before aliens were real. "That sound you hear is the first Caridi shuttle landing on Earth. Gate 3, Hong Kong Strata Port. I'm Alejandro, embedded with Trid. And yes, those streaks in the sky are 6 million reasons the Concord thinks we're about to break." The shuttle came in hot. Its main thruster coughed mid-descent, stabilizing at the last moment with a belch of flame. Landing struts punched into the reinforced cradle. Metal shrieked, then held. The side hatch hissed. Damp air, tinged with salt and something faintly medicinal, spilled out. The first Caridi stepped into Earth's 1G gravity. They were taller than most humans, long-limbed, skin gleaming with moisture that pulsed in faint bioluminescent patterns. Huge dark eyes blinked against harsh port lights. Their muscles trembled under the pull of a world denser than their ocean-heavy home. They froze at the top of the ramp. So did the volunteers. Jonas saw the hesitation like a cliff between them. Fear could live here. So could resentment. He walked up the ramp. The nearest Caridi flinched a little, then stilled. Jonas held out his hand. The Caridi looked down at it. Their translator disc crackled. "Assistance?" it offered in halting common. "Yeah," Jonas said. "That." Cool, flexible fingers wrapped around his. The Caridi leaned into him as they took their first step onto human concrete. Behind them, others followed. Selquari with reed-slim limbs and wide, cautious eyes. Renai with careful folded wings. Volunteers moved forward, hands, slings, wheelchairs at the ready. Alejandro zoomed in on that first clasped hand. "In case anyone ever wonders," he said softly to his unseen audience, "this is the first second Earth physically welcomed our new family." The word went out across a planet, and, despite Concord filters, beyond. On Aurelis Spire, capital of the galactic Concord, it played muted on a side screen in the tribunal chamber, a sharp counterpoint to the smooth phrases High Counselor Jacour was using to justify the accord. "The punitive relocation measure," Jacour said, crystalline ridges refracting chamber light in calculated patterns, "is not capricious. We face populations which have repeatedly destabilized their host systems. They resist integration, carry insurgent ideologies, and provoke conflict wherever they accumulate." Marta Iliev, Earth's envoy, sat rigid in her chair. Her translation rig murmured Jacour's comment into her ear in human cadences. She kept her hands folded tightly to keep from snapping the stylus she held. "We are not exiling them to vacuum," Jacour continued. "We are placing them with a species uniquely adapted to crisis, a so-called death world whose inhabitants pride themselves on surviving the unthinkable. If anyone can handle 6 million difficult cases, they can." "And if they cannot?" Teshar Varn asked. The Rene counselor's feathers were immaculate, but a thread of disquiet ran through her voice. "Then the lesson will be clear," Jacour said. "No world, however resilient, can afford to harbor such contagions indefinitely." Marta seized on the word. "You call them contagions now?" she snapped. "These are people, cultures. You are dumping them on Earth without consent, without resources, and wrapping it in flattery. You have robust infrastructure, breathable air, abundant water," Jacour replied, as if ticking off a shopping list. "This is not an execution, it is an opportunity." "An opportunity you created by burning their homes," Marta said. "Dr. Kaith's world, the Selquari's temples, Dravari stations. You call it cultural stabilization, they call it erasure." Jacour did not flinch. Mimetic contagion doctrine exists for a reason, he said. Ideas spread faster than ships. Worlds burn not only from plasma, but from destabilizing narratives. We contain pathogens. We must contain mimetic threats with equal seriousness. Marta stared at him. Your doctrine frightens me more than any death world, she said. Back on Earth, in the frantic weeks that followed, there was little time to worry about doctrine. New Dharan complex outside the rewilded bones of Delhi became a forest of temporary shelters and semi-permanent structures rising out of monsoon mist. Daskathi builders wove communal holloways inside human steel frames. Karidi medics learned to walk hallways instead of swim corridors, their skin shimmering under recycled water spraying from ceiling nozzles. In the Cascadia buffer zone, where towers met tall pines, Dravari cargo teams reinforced old bridges and laughed awkwardly with human neighbors about gravity and weather. Children of every species chased each other around tangled roots and street stalls. At Lusaka Nexus Hub, an abandoned mall-turned-logistics center, human engineers like Tariq Benali walked new sky bridges with Daskathi coordinators. Together, they turned empty atriums into vertical gardens, stacked with alien crops and familiar grains. In Sahara Confluence Arcology, a sprawling crescent of concrete and glass in North Africa, refugees filled levels that had been projections on an architect's slate 6 months earlier. Markets sprang up overnight, kebabs beside Karidi steamed dishes, Daskathi nutrient gels beside cups of strong tea. Mayali stood on one of the arcology's rooftop terraces and tried to get used to the size of the sky. She had grown up under Selkar Prime's graceful stone vaults, where gravity had been more suggestion than command and the horizon curved gently. Earth's sky went on forever. At first, the openness had terrified her, like standing on the edge of a fall that never ended. Now, watching suns sink into a haze over solar panel fields and heat shimmer, it felt almost like a promise. Behind her, a group of human teenagers argued with Daskathi youth about music. To her left, Amara Solj, the Selkwari spiritual elder who had somehow carried their rituals through the void, murmured a blessing over a small bowl of water and bread shared between a human nurse and a Karidi paramedic. Our old hospitality codes say the guest is sacred, Amara said quietly when Mayali drifted over. We open our doors even in lean years. Now we are the guests, and they, she nodded toward the human volunteer team hauling crates, open their doors anyway. That means the code runs both ways. Mayali wasn't sure what she could offer in return yet, but as she watched children, a human, a Karidi, a Selkwari, chalk their respective worlds and Earth on the same section of rooftop concrete, she suspected they would figure it out together. Not everyone wanted that. In the shadowed corners of refugee queues and human alleys, Red Halo Syndicate moved quietly. They approached Mayali's cousin one evening at New Dharan when the heat had finally eased and the smell of cooking fires tangled with damp canvas. You remember what your world was like before they came, the recruiter said. They wore human clothes, but their accent bore traces of Dravari consonants. A translator disc at their throat flickered. It's gone, her cousin said, bitterness a hard edge in his voice. It is gone because the conquered decided it was inconvenient, the recruiter said. And now they have dropped you here, with people who will tire of you as soon as it costs them too much. The humans talk of family now. Wait until the pressure climbs. They will look for someone to blame. And you? Mayali's cousin asked. We offer you a way to strike before that happens, the recruiter said. Food, weapons, targets we choose, not they. Mayali argued with him later, voice thick. Give it time, she begged. Look at what they've already done. Look at what they are trying to build. You always think kindness can fix everything, he said. Kindness did not stop them from burning our world. Red Halo did not need everyone. They only needed enough angry, rootless people to throw sparks into dry places. They found some of those sparks in Sahara Confluence Arcology. The arcology was still a half-finished organism, organs wired together in ways the original plans had never imagined. Refugees stretched the design beyond safe tolerances. Cooling systems wheezed. Power grids blinked warning codes. Red Halo saw leverage. They hit the fusion grid on the hottest afternoon in weeks. Priya Imani was already half drowned in anomalous sensor readings, fingers drumming on a battered desk as code cascaded over her screens. This is normal ramp, she muttered. This is new load. This is garbage. This is... Her eyes narrowed. A pattern emerged. It wasn't the random jitter of tired infrastructure. It was purposeful, someone nudging valves and regulators toward failure from multiple control nodes. She punched a line to local operations. Grid Center, this is Priya at Mumbai Net. You've got company in your walls. We're seeing it, came the breathless reply. Failsafes are tripping, but something keeps shoving them off. Manual overrides? Somebody's in the sublevels, the voice said. We've lost cameras. In those sublevels, Red Halo operatives moved quickly. They had stolen access badges from underpaid contractors and exploited gaps in overwhelmed security. They ducked through steam-filled corridors, slapping code bombs onto control trunks, overriding interlocks. They didn't want a clean failure, they wanted a cascade. Up above, in stairwells and corridors, lights flickered, fans slowed, pumps whined. In a cramped hallway, Jonas Reddick smelled the air change before the alarms kicked in. Years in disaster response had tuned his instincts to listen for the wrong kind of silence. "Power's going," someone shouted. "My vent!" Sirens wailed. Emergency strips flickered to life. Jonas grabbed his radio. "Reddick, I'm at level 19, Sector 5. I'm hearing vent alarms and coolant warnings. Talk to me." "Sabotage in the grid," a harried voice responded. "We're trying to dump loads, but it's bad. We need everybody clearing the vulnerable zones, especially medical. Gravity is about to get real for anyone on powered assist." Jonas didn't hesitate. He ran. He passed Daskathi elders clicking to calm panicked larvae. He passed a human nurse lifting an unconscious Karidi child. He scooped up an elderly Karidi whose legs had simply stopped cooperating halfway down a stair. "You weigh like a soggy sofa," he grunted, readjusting his grip. The translator on their chest wheezed amusement through fear. "Apologies. We grew up in heavy water. We are not designed for lightness." "Next time there's a blackout, you carry me," Jonas said. They reached a level where volunteers had rigged a rope and pulley system out of fire hoses and Daskathi webbing. He handed the elder off, clapped a railing, and turned back up into the dark. On a landing above, Elias Cade was hauling boxes of portable medkits with a tangle of volunteers. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd been in a video conference with the assembly when Sahara's grid screamed. He'd shut the connection and been on the first shuttle out. "You realize," Jonas puffed as they nearly collided on the stairs, "we have people whose job this actually is." "And they're doing it," Elias said. "We're doing this." He gestured at the dark. "You didn't think you were the only one allowed to sweat in the field, did you?" In the control room, Priya stared at the main schematic. Lines of force crawled like angry river snakes toward a junction that could either route power safely into the ground or... "If we let this go, the automatic dampers will pop," she said aloud. "They might hold. They might also blow half the grid into plasma and tear a hole through 3 housing blocks." "Options?" asked Auric Tal, towering over her shoulder. The Dravari's 4 hands hovered above a backup console, ready. "We vent some of the surge into the atmosphere," Priya said. "Use the upper air like a huge heat sink." "Is that safe?" someone asked. "No," she said. "Safer." She gestured at the simulation. "Think of it as a lightning storm we choose instead of an explosion we don't." "Do it!" Auric rumbled. Priya's fingers flew. Safeties snapped loose. Alternate pathways lit like arteries on the diagram. The overload hit the rerouted path. For a second, nothing happened. Then, above Sahara Confluence Arcology, the sky exploded in color. An artificial aurora draped itself across the heavens, sheets of green and blue and red shimmering where no such lights had any business being. The air hummed. People poured onto balconies and rooftops, squinting up through dust and heat. On the rooftop terrace, Mayali stood frozen, hand on a rail. Beside her, a human child laughed, pointing. A Daskathi larva curled its feet tighter into the mesh, half afraid, half entranced. Alejandro Duarte, in a makeshift triage center 2 levels down, felt the room brighten through dirty skylights. He swung his camera up, catching the glowing veil. "Okay," he said, breathless but steady. "For those tuning in late, that light show is not a festival. That's Priya and the grid team turning a terrorist attack into art instead of rubble." He panned down to show human and alien medics working shoulder to shoulder, sweat and bioluminescence glistening alike. "Earth is still here," he said. "They're still here. We're still here." Later, sifting through the wreckage of code and hardware, Priya and Auric found more than sabotage. Transaction logs, half scrubbed, clung to the underside of the grid security modules. With help from a Karidi cipher specialist and a Daskathi who treated encryption like just another weave, they traced the money. Red Halo had funding streams that led straight into an obscure Concord security account labeled Stability Operations Discretionary. That doesn't look like corruption skimming, Priya said tightly, as numbers arranged themselves into patterns no one wanted to see. That looks like someone paying criminals to make us look incompetent. They wanted this place to burn, Oryx said. They wanted proof we can't handle the punishment, Priya replied, so they can come in hard, say they were right, and write the report before the smoke clears. The next day, Elias Cade stood in a plaza still smelling faintly of burnt insulation and street food and spoke to the world. Behind him, the flags and symbols of many nations and species moved in the dry wind. In front of him, a crowd that might never have existed a year ago, human, Karidi, Daskathi, Selquari, Dravari, waited. Alejandro's camera streamed the image. Selquari modified comms SATs nudged the signal through Concord filters. Outer compact relays, run by techs who had grown fond of Alejandro's feed, quietly boosted it. Yesterday, Elias said, someone tried to turn this arcology into a crater. Images of dark stairwells and improvised pulleys of the impossible aurora flickered on a screen behind him. The group calling itself Red Halo claimed responsibility. We have found that they have not been acting alone. They have been fed arms and information and money from within the Concord security apparatus. The crowd hissed, clicked, murmured. Anger tasted the air. This does not mean every Concord official is complicit, Elias continued. It does mean someone out there decided our failure was more important than your lives, that they were willing to risk killing you, not to save anyone, but to make a point. He let the anger settle. When the punitive relocation accord was passed, he said, it was framed as a burden we would be forced to bear. You were called contagion, destabilizers, unmanageable. He looked at the faces before him. You were supposed to punish us just by existing here, he said. We were supposed to resent you. Some of us did. Some still do. But then we saw you carry our elders downstairs, and we carried yours. We saw you fix our grids, and you saw us share our food. They dropped 6 million strangers on us. We made room for family. The word hung in the air like a new law. You tried to use them to punish us, Elias said, looking directly into the camera now as if Jakur were sitting in front of him. You succeeded only in giving us more reasons to stand together. The family speech, as people would come to call it, did not sound like a declaration of war. It sounded like stubborn hospitality. It spread anyway. Concord filters culled some copies, flagged keywords, inserted warnings, but feeds were re-uploaded, mirrored, replayed on outer compact stations where local laws were looser and sympathies more fluid. On a cargo ring orbiting a star in the compact, dock workers crowded into a lounge to watch a shaky replay with subtitles. When Elias said, family, a Dravari worker murmured, they're mad, and then, after a beat, I like it. In his Aurelius office, Crinner Hall read a transcript and smiled thinly. Greedy, stubborn primates, he said. You found a seam. With Priya's evidence in hand, Liam Harcourt had already begun to pry at that seam. Earth's lawyers couldn't stop the accord. It had passed. But inside it, buried in rushed phrasing, was the word stewardship. Relocated populations shall be placed under the provisional stewardship of a signatory member world, which shall ensure their basic needs, safety, and rights. To Concord bureaucrats, stewardship meant storage. To Liam, it read like a binding duty. He helped draft the Terran Sanctuary Declaration, a dry, almost boring document that did something quietly radical. Pursuant to the Articles of Sentient Dignity, it said, Earth accepted stewardship not as a temporary warehouse, but as a sanctuary. No one under its protection would be removed without explicit consent. He sent it up the official channels, stamped in all the right places. He also sent an unannotated copy to Crinnar. Crinnar read it twice. Then he walked down a corridor to Teshar Varn's office. They are taking our own words and nailing them to our door, he said. It is elegant. Teshar studied the clauses. This will make Jakur furious, she observed. Yes, Crinnar said, that is a point in its favor. Jakur was already furious. In closed rooms of the Concord Security Secretariat, analysts laid out graphs and curves. This family narrative is spreading despite filters, one said, gesturing at a heat map of data flows. It reframes our enforcement as cruelty and their defiance as morality. It is exactly what mimetic contagion doctrine warned us about. Jacques stared at the projections, worlds in the outer compact glowing brighter with each share, quiet unrest on worlds closer to home. Then we treat it as contagion, he said. We quarantine the source. What does that mean practically? An aide asked, though they suspected. Sanctioned containment protocols, Jacques answered. We assemble a fleet. We go to Sol. We make certain this experiment does not infect the rest of us. Commander Rex Eru heard the orders 2 days later. He stood on the bridge of his cruiser, gazing out at the starfield. Around his ship, other Concord vessels maneuvered into formation, clean hulls gleaming. The briefing packets were clear enough. Ensure Sol system did not export instability, secure or remove relocated populations, enforce order if Earth resisted. Rex had read the official reports on Earth. He had also, like many in the fleet, watched Alejandro Duarte's feed at odd hours, the unauthorized mirror stream flickering on rec room walls. He had seen Jonas carrying a Caridi elder. He had seen a Descathi wrapping their body around a leaking pipe. He had seen Mayali, unnamed, under the impossible aurora. His people valued order, but they also valued honor. He addressed his bridge crew before the jump. Our orders are to contain a supposed threat, he said. We will obey lawful commands. We will maintain discipline. We will not, however, forget the articles. We do not target civilians. We do not uproot cultures for convenience. If we are asked to cross those lines, I will take responsibility for any refusal. Some looked relieved. Some looked afraid. They jumped. In Seoul, Aegis Array's sensors screamed as space-time flexed. Multiple mass entries at the perimeter, Yelena reported. Concord signatures, heavy. On Noor al-Farid's console in the Seoul Perimeter Authority bunker, icons bloomed like a new constellation at the edge of the system. Each represented a ship Earth's defenses could not match, not one-on-one. We always knew they might come, Noor said. Time to see if we've made our death world interesting enough to be hard to kill. Her staff moved in concert, activating Protocol Blue. Requests went out through TRIAD and the Coalition of Displaced Worlds. They were invitations, not summons. To Descathi builders, we need your fast construction skills to reinforce orbital net nodes. To Dravari engineers, volunteers willing to help pilot drones and repair damaged platforms. To Caridi and Selquari techs, communications, sensor fusion, data tricks. The responses came back quickly, and mostly affirmative. They opened their doors when we were drowning, Pale 7 of Embers clicked in a Lusaka meeting. We will help hold the roof. At Cascadia, Mayali listened as Nia Fossey, now an exhausted but effective community organizer, explained what was coming. There's a big fleet outside, Nia said simply to the Youth Council. The adults are going to try very hard to keep them from blowing us up. We need you to keep your neighborhoods from blowing themselves up. Translation, rumor control, comfort. We're short on grown-ups everywhere. Mayali raised her hand. I'll coordinate for my block, she said. Selquari, Common, some Caridi, and people know my face. Good, Nia said. You're officially more responsible than I was at your age. The ultimatum from the fleet came down like a cold front. Sol system must surrender the relocated populations for transfer to secure facilities. Failure to comply will result in enforcement actions. It was delivered in precise, toneless common. Elias, Noor, Yelena, Amayera, Lyson Kaith, Pale 7 of Embers, and representatives from several refugee groups gathered in a tried conference room that had once been a municipal planning office. They want us to unchoose each other, Amayera said quietly. After all this. Elias looked very tired. He thought of that village by the river years ago, of people perched on roofs surrounded by brown water. If we say yes, he said, we betray them. If we say no, we risk everyone. If we say maybe, they will hear yes, Noor added. We don't have the luxury of half measures. They have ships, Pale 7 of Embers said. We have ladders we built together. We can die on those ladders or under them. That's the clearest strategic analysis I've heard all day, Noor said. Elias nodded. We answer, he said. His response went out everywhere the ultimatum had, and further thanks to sympathetic relays. "This is Elias Cade," he began, "for the United Earth Assembly and the Coalition of Displaced Worlds." He recited the fleet's demands, then shook his head. "You already relocated these people," he said. "You dropped them on us without consent, then watched to see if we'd drown. We didn't. We made something here together. It's messy and hard and imperfect, but it's real." He gestured off-screen. Images of mixed markets, schools, clinics flickered by. "You call them contagion," he said. "I call them neighbors. You talk about secure facilities. We've seen what you mean by that on Karid, on Selkar Prime, in Dravari rings emptied for stability. We will not send our family into those cages." He leaned closer to the lens. "Earth is a sanctuary," he said. "We accept that role. No one under our protection will be taken by force. If any individual chooses to leave with you of their own free will, we will not stop them. But we will not hand over a single person to ease your fear of ideas." Silence held for a beat. If you fire," Elias said softly, "you own that story forever. If you don't, if you send observers instead, if you let your own people look and see, maybe there's a different story we can write." On CS Resolute Mantle's bridge, Rex listened. He did not see defiance for its own sake. He saw someone drawing a line around vulnerable people and saying, "Here and no further." Jakur's reply to the fleet cut across his reflection. "Demonstrate the consequences of non-compliance. Target an unauthorized defensive node." "Select a non-populated orbital asset," Rex told his tactical chief. "We will test their shields, not their houses." The first shot of the standoff carved through space a day later. Energy beams lanced toward an Aegis array node. Elena saw them as jagged spikes on her board. "Nimbus shields now," she snapped. Seated in the upper atmosphere and extended into lower space, Earth's improvised shield network flared. Some of the incoming fire scattered, diffused. Some was absorbed by the Grav lattice web, a mesh of repurposed junk and anchored mass that flexed under the blow. One beam punched through, hitting a secondary Aegis node. Metal bloomed into vapor. Shrapnel spun away, glinting. "We're alive," someone whispered. "Yes," Elena said, "and so are they. Let's make them work for every shot." Earth's response was measured. No direct strikes on manned-conquered vessels. Drones harassed targeting arrays. Old satellites fitted with new drives and painted bright, flared decoys. The Grav lattice turned orbital debris into armor. In the fleet, Jakur tried to force control. He pushed override codes down encrypted channels, seeking to take direct command of firing solutions. The commands met quiet resistance, slowed relays, misrouted signals, accidental hardware glitches introduced by engineers who had watched too many of Alejandro's streams to fire blind. Rex convened his officers. "You have seen the feeds," he said. "Propaganda or not, they show children, clinics, shared meals. That is what we will hit if we accept certain orders." He looked each officer in the eyes. "I am not asking you to rebel," he said. "I am asking you to remember the charter. If you are given a target you cannot in conscience accept, say so. I will carry it. If they strip us of rank, we will live with that. If we kill millions to preserve someone's comfort, we will not live with anything." On Aurelis, Krinner brought Priya's data and Alejandro's footage to the tribunal. Tesher stood beside him. "The Security Secretariat funded provocations to make Earth's sanctuary fail," Krinner said. "They sabotaged infrastructure to justify harsher measures. That is not stability. That is entrapment. The mimetic contagion doctrine has become an excuse to crush any culture that does not fit tidy lines," Tesher added. "We were meant to protect sentient life, not curate it." The chamber buzzed, Jakur argued. He warned of chaos, fragmentation, the death of the Concord's order. But the images of mixed rescue teams under artificial auroras, of children from different worlds drawing their homes beside Earth under Isaac Mbai's watchful eye, had seeped into too many minds. The Aurelis resolution passed. It did not undo the accord. It did something subtler. It recognized Earth as a sanctuary jurisdiction. It affirmed that stewardship meant protection, not warehousing. It suspended broad use of the mimetic contagion doctrine, pending stricter oversight. It granted the Coalition of Displaced Worlds the right to speak in Concord sessions. It politely, but clearly, removed Jakur from his seat atop the Security Secretariat. Orders filtered to the fleet, Cease offensive action, hold position, permit outer compact observers to enter Sol. In the Sol perimeter bunker, Noor listened to the update and finally sat back in her chair. "We are not safe," she told Yelena over a secure line. "We're less unsafe. I'll take that." On Earth, observers came. They walked through Sahara Confluence, through Cascadia, through New Daran. They sat in Isaac's classroom and listened to children define home in their own words. "Home is where my mama is," said a human girl. "Home is where you can sleep without listening for boots," said a Dravari boy. "Home is where people do not throw you away," clicked a Descathi larva, and none of the adults in the room quite knew what to do with the way that sentence cut. Years later, the memory of those answers would matter more than any resolution. For the moment, it was enough that the shooting stopped. Time moved. The crisis didn't vanish. It settled, like sediment at the bottom of a river, shaping the flow in quieter ways. At Sahara Confluence, rooftop gardens grew dense. Human herbs mingled with Selquari blossoms and Descathi nutrient vines. From above, the Arcology's crown looked like a patchworked forest. Lysen Kaith ran a clinic on level 12, its sign printed in 3 scripts. His days blurred into a stream of patients. Human kids with scraped knees from rougher games on crowded stairs, Dravari elders whose bones complained about Earth's gravity, Karidi whose gills still wanted more humidity than any building could easily provide. Hana Okada, his human counterpart, lit up with professional delight at every new cross-species puzzle. Together, they wrote quiet papers on shared immunities and unexpected compatibilities. In Cascadia, Isaac's school had proper windows now, showing glimpses of trees and towers. His students argued in a riot of languages about music, law, and what to plant in the community garden. Some of the first refugee children had turned into lanky teenagers with strong opinions. Elias Cade's hair had gone grayer at the temples. The plaque on his office no longer read merely Terran Refugee Integration Directorate. TRID had grown into something less temporary, more layered. The Sanctuary Council. He still refused to wear a tie when he could help it. Mayali, now one of his advisors rather than simply one of his symbols, sometimes caught him staring out the window at the hazy city. "Do you ever wish they'd dumped fewer people on us?" she asked him once, half teasing. Elias considered. "No," he said. "I wish they'd never needed to be dumped anywhere. Failing that, I'm glad it was here." In orbit, Aegis Array's systems hummed along in their new, better-tuned equilibrium. Yelena still walked the same corridors, though now the crew came from more worlds. One afternoon, as she drank a lukewarm coffee and contemplated a stubborn sensor glitch near the Kuiper edge, an alarm chimed. "Unexpected FTL wake," her officer said, startled. "Single vessel, tiny, not on any Concord or compact registry." "Display," Yelena said. A tiny ship tumbled at the edge of Sol's gravity well. Its hull was scorched, panels missing. Its drive signature was a messy scribble in the data, a technology no one on her board recognized. More important were the faint flickering life signs inside. "It's broadcasting," the comms tech said. "Some kind of distress. I'll run it through the translator." Noise filled the room, then resolved into halting common. "Please," it said, "we are running. They are hunting. Any world, any harbor. Please, please help." Yelena stared at the signal for a long second, then opened a priority channel. "Put me through to Noor," she said, "and to Elias, and to the council, now." In the Sanctuary Council chamber, people appeared as hollow figures above the table. Noor in her bunker, Amira in a small shrine room, Pale 7 of Embers in a construction bay, Mayali at Elias's shoulder. Yelena pushed the sensor feed and the translated plea into the shared view. "We could redirect them," someone said quietly after a moment. "Tell them to go to the Concord, or the Compact. We've done our part." Elias listened to the tiredness in that voice. He felt his own bones answering in sympathy. He thought of the first falling streaks, of Jonas taking a stranger's hand on a ramp, of the aurora over Sahara, of the day a fleet had arrived to turn his people's stubborn kindness into a cautionary tale and had gone away instead with a lesson. He smiled, the expression worn but still sharp. "Clear a lane," he said. "Make room." He met Mayali's eyes. She nodded, a tiny, fierce motion. "Looks like someone else is about to get dumped on our doorstep," Elias added. "This time, maybe we get to choose how the story starts." Far out in the dark, the damaged ship spun, broadcasting its thin cry into a universe that had not often answered such cries with mercy. This time, the answer came from a blue world that had turned punishment into promise. "Come," its signal said. "Come, we have room."